Hi friends, which of these breads do you think is the healthiest? I'm going to show you that it's not what you think. Now, I got this bread from Switzerland. I got this bread from Texas. And the rest of these breads I got from California. So why did I get these breads thousands of miles apart? Well, to show you that these are not the same, even though we call all of these bread. Now, when you Google the word bread, this is a definition. Bread is a food made of flour, water, and yeast, or another leavening agent, mixed together and baked. 3 ingredients. Simple, right? In America, we think that the least amount of ingredients is the healthier food. We like convenience. Well, that's why people are getting metabolically sick. When was the last time you ate bread made out of 1 grain or just 3 ingredients? Now, if you're gluten-free, you're probably eating bread with ingredients with multiple different grains, except it's probably metabolically even worse than a single whole grain baked bread that's been around since 14,500 years ago. Bread is an ancient food. Now, if you're health conscious, you're probably looking for a low carb bread and one high in fiber. And these ingredients in your bread are probably so far from the original recipe that I would consider what you're eating to be an engineered food. Now, I traveled to Switzerland and ate what ancient bread should taste like. 1 in 3 Americans have prediabetes. 1 in 3 of you watching this video has prediabetes because this is a worldwide phenomenon. Or you may already have type 2 diabetes, a disease brought on purely by convenient engineered food and engineered transportation. Unlike technology, food quality and movement are not getting annual upgrades, but we keep finding ways to downgrade our food quality and movement over time. The Swiss eat bread all the time. It's one of their staple foods. They eat it for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. Some people eat 5 meals a day. But only 5% of their population has prediabetes. And just about everybody there eats bread. And if you tell them that bread is unhealthy, they're going to look at me funny. They did look at me funny because they are a longevity country. They actually are a top 5 longevity country. So who am I from America, ranked number like 46, to tell them what to eat? And they take this bread and they dip it in their fondue. So I went to Switzerland to find out what's up with Swiss bread, that they can eat this stuff and outlive all the other Western countries. So I thought I would have to go to a bakery. But no, their locals told me to just go to the supermarket. Their supermarket bread was just as good in quality and taste as their bakery bread. And honestly, I couldn't believe how much fresh bread was made from the supermarkets to the bakeries. There were bakeries everywhere. And there were loaves and loaves, rows and rows of bread in every market. I literally saw bread that was like this big. I mean, it was incredible. It wasn't just one loaf. It was several loaves that was coming fresh from the oven. I would have bought it, except I was going home and all I had was a carry-on, so I couldn't shove that bread in my suitcase. Otherwise, I would have brought it home. I literally found bread that had more fiber than carbohydrates. I thought, what kind of food engineering was this? It was literally the size of a brick and almost as heavy as a brick. So I took my phone and Google translated the ingredients, and they're not adding fiber powder. That bread was made out of nuts and seeds. In fact, many of their breads, like this one, has nuts and seeds. They either have it sprinkled on top or folded inside. And the reason why you can eat bread from Switzerland and not get metabolically unhealthy is because of their food quality. So here are 3 things to look for when you're trying to find the healthiest bread. Number 1, poke your bread. Number 2, read the ingredients. Here's a list of how I would screen my bread. Number 3, pick ones with nuts and seeds, but not ones that have nuts and seeds listed as less than 2% of the ingredients. Let's dissect number 1 and why you should poke your bread. So remember the definition: flour, water, and yeast. If you've ever mixed flour and water and left it on the countertop, you know it turns rock hard. It's not this squishy stuff. Are we eating bread or are we eating cake? In fact, I was trying to cut a loaf of bread in Switzerland and it literally broke my plastic knife. So I got a whole bunch of breads. Let's poke them. Okay, I'm going to start with this bread. I have it right here. We're going to poke them. I'm going to squish it. See what happens, right? Okay, it's not quite as squishy as a soft Hawaiian roll, and it kind of bounces back, right? I don't want bread to bounce back. I kind of want bread not to squish, okay? So that's one bread. This is this bread, right? I'm squishing it. It's not bouncing back at all. So we're gonna take this bread now, and I'm gonna do the same thing. It's kind of bouncy, a little bit, okay? More so than definitely this bread, all right? And this is the one I got from Texas. It would be this package, right? It's kind of going back into shape. Even though, you know, this is sliced. It's almost not fair, right? Because this one has a shell and these don't, right? But this one's kind of going back into shape and this one isn't. So usually you can't take your bread out on the store shelves. So what I do is I kind of squish it, see if it gives or not, right? That kind of tells me the quality of ingredients. So I know I'm gonna like destroy the bread. I don't eat this stuff. Somebody else bought it. I'm just borrowing it as a prop. You can't really destroy the bread, but I give it a little squish. So this one I can't squish yet because I found it in the freezer section, and I've kept it in the freezer section because I traveled to Texas and then I came back. This was like my lunch that I ate. So already you know I'm gonna eat this bread because I found it to be good quality. And then this bread didn't pass the squish test. So I'm gonna squish this bread now and see what happens. Now I didn't cut it into a slice, so it's kind of not fair. And it's a little bit too big for my hands to squish, but I can't squeeze it. I literally can't squeeze this bread, right? Like I'm trying. Okay, so I'm literally gonna take my hand and squish it. Nothing happened to it. This is a bread from Switzerland. It passed my poke test. So the better quality ingredients you have, intact whole grains, the harder it is to squish. So let's kind of read the ingredients list, okay? So this bread has enriched flour. That's a number one ingredient. So it is not a whole grain. That's why it's so squishable. It's basically starch. It's like your cornstarch on a countertop, right? It's a form of starch from this grain. And then of course the flour is supplemented with a bunch of vitamins. And then they have water and sugar. And then they have butter. And then they have eggs. So those are the main ingredients. And then it has a thing called contains less than 2% of each of the following. So I'm going to read these ingredients, see if you can follow along. Sodium silicoaluminate, potato flour, yeast, sorbitan monostearate, ascorbic acid, added gluten, datum, calcium silicate for anti-caking, sodium lactolate, calcium sulfate, ammonium sulfate, wheat starch, and enzymes. Does that sound like bread to you? I'm going to take this. I'm going to read this ingredient list. It says organic whole wheat flour, water, organic vital wheat gluten, contains 2% or less of organic sugar, organic wheat bran, yeast, organic honey, organic oat fiber, okay, organic molasses, organic expeller pressed canola oil, sea salt, organic distilled vinegar, microbial enzyme, organic guar gum, ascorbic acid, which is a dough conditioner. This is just wheat. Does that sound like bread to you? This is the next bread. It says organic, unbleached, enriched flour. So not any different than the Hawaiian rolls, except it's organic, which is made out of organic wheat flour, as well as a bunch of vitamins, okay? Then it has water, sea salt, yeast, organic malted barley flour. So pretty close to what the definition of bread is. But the drawback is that it was made from a starch, not from the whole grain. So I'm gonna read this brand, which is Ezekiel. So it says organic sprouted wheat, filtered water, organic sprouted barley, organic sprouted millet, organic malted barley, organic sprouted lentils, organic sprouted soybeans, organic sprouted spelt, yeast, organic wheat gluten, sea salt. All right. Now this has a whole bunch of different ingredients, but they're all seems to be whole food except for the wheat gluten. So that's pretty close to what the Swiss eat, because I looked up these ingredients and it's pretty simple ingredients, just like the original definition of bread. So now let's dissect the ingredient list. The reason why you want to get a whole grain bread or a sprouted grain bread, and preferably organic, is because you want the intact whole grain with the bran and germ in its original matrix to surround the starch. This protects your body from sugar spikes. So when you remove the bran and germ, that flour lasts longer on the store shelves because it's essentially starch. You've removed the fat and the fiber. The starch is what spikes your sugar even higher than table sugar. Now, there are a couple of tricks to eating starch so you can actually lower your blood sugar spikes. Number one is the reason why I keep this bread in the freezer. It's because when you refrigerate the bread or you freeze the bread, there's a chemical reaction that happens called retrogradation. This turns the sugar starches into a resistant starch in which your body cannot digest. But your gut microbiome can digest it, so it's essentially a form of fiber. And heating it up will still maintain most of its resistant starch. And the second thing you can do is what professional athletes do. They exercise. So if you want to eat all these breads, go exercise. But if you're looking for health and nutrition, then you have to have a diversity of ingredients. The single one ingredient foods that we eat in America is metabolically destroying our metabolism. We need to eat a diversity of foods because no single ingredient can fulfill our nutritional needs. And we are eating in abundance wheat. So much so in all our bakery items that it is so dangerous. We're collecting toxins from the wheat and we're not diversifying our micronutrients. In addition, when these companies load the bread up with sugar, you're essentially eating a form of candy, a form of pastry, a form of dessert. Because it's not just a starch that's going to spike your sugar, it's going to be the simple sugars in this bread. So whether they add table sugar or agave or honey, it's still sugar. It's still going to increase your blood sugars. These ingredients are not supposed to be in ancient bread. They're added to bread to change the texture and the taste. And basically, you're eating a form of cake. Now, if you're going to eat cake. Don't pretend it's bread. Now, what's even worse than the simple sugars and the starches are the oils. Even if it's some high-grade olive oil or other vegetable oils, oils are placed in your bread to change the texture. But your body can't metabolize sugar and oils at the same time. The presence of one shuts off the metabolism of the other. So if you're eating an excess amount of these things with sugar and oil, then it's going to change your metabolism. And you're going to start packing on fat. Because it's a combination of fat with carbohydrates that drives insulin resistance, that then drives fat storage. And when you get insulin resistant, you also get fatty liver as well as obesity. And this is how people are getting TOFI. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. Asians aren't just eating white rice. Have you eaten at a Chinese restaurant? Do you know how greasy that food is? In America, we like to hoard food. So if your bread has been sitting around for weeks and not molding, you have a preservative in that bread. Take a look at your keto breads. There's a ton of preservatives because oils go rancid. Preservatives can alter your gut microbiome, trigger digestive and immune issues. Have you ever gotten poison ivy? Don't underestimate that the tiniest amount of chemicals can lead to serious health issues. There are over 10,000 chemical additives that the FDA allows in our food. Sorbitan monostearate, datum, calcium silicate, sodium stearyl acetate, calcium sulfate, ammonium sulfate. Are these things foods? Or are you eating chemicals? Now, the more they engineer your bread, the more emulsifiers they're going to need to kind of get the bread to all mix smoothly together. So you want to check for gums like xanthan gum, guar gum, lecithin, monoglycerides, sorbitan esters, polysorbate 60 and 80, calcium stearyl lactylate. And that datum, that is diacetyl tartaric acid ester of monoglycerides. Stearyl lactylate, citric acid esters of mono and diglycerides. I mean, I have to go get a chemistry PhD to even begin to understand how these chemicals interact with my body. So emulsifiers, they're basically soap, right? They're detergents. Their job is to wash away your gut microbiome. That's not why they're added to food, but that's the end result of what happens. So instead of killing your gut microbes with an antibiotic, you could just take an emulsifier and then wash it all away. Don't do that. You've been building your gut microbiome since you were born. In fact, your gut microbiome is from your maternal grandmother. She has given that to you. That is what is protecting your health, and you should protect it back. So to compensate, bread companies try to give you engineered foods with added fibers because they know that that's the trigger word for people to purchase. Psyllium fiber, inulin, beta-glucans, dextrin, methylcellulose, guar gum, xanthan gum, pectin, cellulose gum, acacia fiber. These individual ingredients may sound healthy, but their metabolic effects are to be determined. And when you eat parts and pieces of chemicals in a food separately from its food matrix, in its whole food matrix, you will have a different metabolism. Some of these fibers have dual functional effects. They actually act like emulsifiers, like guar gum. To all your bread companies, you have a fiduciary duty to help solve our metabolic crisis by adding individual components to manipulate texture to extend shelf life. You are in fact engineering food and contributing to our metabolic crisis. Do not play with the texture of bread. There are no added fiber in the original definition of bread. If you want to add more fiber, add it in nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are not only protective in moderation, but they give you essential fatty acids. They're a great source of not only fiber, but protein. They help you feel fuller longer. They also protect your DNA and they protect your metabolism against diabetes, being overweight. They're also expensive, much more expensive than any grain flour. So usually companies won't put expensive ingredients like nuts and seeds in a cheap bread product.
Hi friends, I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Engineered foods pretending to be bread are flooding our store shelves with labels like organic, keto, all natural, plant-based, high fiber, multigrain. But millions of people continue to get metabolically unhealthy at astronomical rates. Food is not like technology. We are not upgrading our food quality, but instead being lured by marketing that ancient foods can be improved by modern engineering. History keeps proving this wrong. Now, I am a bread lover, but I gave it up. It got too complex to read ingredients. When I was young, I really thought bread was a healthy food. I ate bagels every day for lunch. Every day throughout college. I was such a bagel fan that when I visited my brother at Harvard, we went bagel hopping in Cambridge and I literally ate 3 whole bagels in one morning at 3 different bagel shops. It was delicious. And the reason why I love bagels is because they're a little bit chewy. I love cinnamon raisin bagels because they were sweet. That was the wrong kind of bagel. But because I was young and I was active, exercising every day, I could eat highly refined engineered carbohydrates and still look skinny to a certain degree. But when I got busy in my career, I became more sedentary. Those engineered high glycemic index foods that I ate for decades finally broke my metabolism and gave me fatty liver, which caused me to get insulin resistance, which gave me gestational diabetes with my first pregnancy, even though I technically wasn't obese. And this is because Asians, genetically, we store fat in our gut as opposed to external subcutaneous fat. In other words, Asians often have a higher body fat percentage at the same BMI compared to people of European or African descent. And this is particularly true for fat distribution in the gut. And even with a lower BMI, they can have a greater proportion of visceral fat. So many Asians have a condition called TOFI. TOFI stands for thin on the outside, fat on the inside, describing individuals who appear lean or have a normal body weight, even a low BMI, but carry an unhealthy amount of visceral fat. Fat caking our internal organs. Now, the classic example is a person with a beer belly. During residency, I was working with a nurse who I thought was pregnant. She had a huge abdominal girth. And after several months, one day I asked her when she was due. Well, I learned to never ask anybody when they're due. Now, if it was only about how a person looks, then it would be a non-issue. If you have TOFI, you increase your risk of metabolic issues like insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, despite looking skinny. The accumulation of visceral fat is strongly linked to heart disease and atherosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries, which increases the risk of a heart attack and stroke. So unlike subcutaneous fat or people who get like love handles, visceral fat is invisible to the naked eye, but surrounds your internal organs, including your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. And when you get abdominal surgery, we can see it very clearly with the visible eye. And unfortunately, it's not so good to hold up sutures. Visceral fat changes your metabolism for the worse. It is metabolically active by itself, producing inflammatory substances that also mess up your immunity. Unfortunately, I can't change the fact that I'm Asian. Asian genes get more TOFI. But how much of that is our lifestyle choices by eating highly refined starches and processed foods like white rice, rice crackers, mochi, boba, udon, rice noodles? White rice is not a nutritious food. Heard of beriberi? In the late 19th century, beriberi became a widespread problem in Southeast Asia because their staple food was white, polished rice, the stuff you're eating today. Beriberi is a condition caused by thiamine deficiency and leads to symptoms like muscle weakness, paralysis, heart failure, and permanent neurological problems. Left untreated, beriberi is fatal. And during this period, the traditional process of rice consumption shifted as mechanized rice milling or polishing rice became more common. Polished white rice became popular because it has a longer shelf life. It was more appealing in appearance compared to brown unpolished rice, and people liked the taste and texture. However, that technology, the polishing, removes the outer layers of the rice grain, the bran and germ, which are rich in essential vitamins like thiamine. And when you starve yourself or when you fast, the first thing that will get you, besides dehydration, is thiamine deficiency. Chickens were crucial to saving thousands of lives in Southeast Asia. People didn't eat the chickens, but the chickens just so happened to get beriberi too. So chickens fed polished rice got beriberi, while those fed rice husks with polished white rice remain healthy. Now, rice has been eaten for 13,000 years, but it is only since the advent of modern technology to polish the whole grain rice into white rice that caused clusters of people to die. So what do we do as a society? Well, we now eat rice cakes, gluten-free rice bread, Asian rice tamales, rice noodles, rice crackers, rice mochi. These are not traditional ancient Asian foods. These are modern, technology-driven processed ingredients that have been deceptively weaved and assimilated into every Asian diet. Now, if you're not mad about that, then you're probably not eating white rice. But you're not going to die of beriberi from eating white rice anymore because your rice is now fortified with thiamine. So we've traded off an acute, life-threatening condition for chronic metabolic diseases or poor nutrition with fatty liver and diabetes and obesity. We're eating empty calories because we're eating poor quality food. Now today, we still have thiamine deficiency, and the most at-risk people are the ones who aren't eating well or absorbing their nutrients. So people who have had bariatric surgery, inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or celiac, or short gut, or restrictive diets that limit carbohydrates, or they have illnesses or trauma, or are addicted to alcohol. All these exceed the minimum recommended amount of thiamine. That tiny RDA dose, it's not going to fix these people's metabolism. Have you seen what that minimum intake is? Thiamine is so benign, it's water soluble. So if I eat more than what my body needs, I just pee it out. So I want to guarantee that I get enough. And that's why I can't just aim for the minimum amount. I can't even prescribe the minimum RDA amount for thiamine. When we think you're thiamine deficient, we want your body to get that fixed quickly. So it's not uncommon. We're prescribing 100 milligrams of IV thiamine at least once a day. Thiamine is an essential vitamin for carbohydrate metabolism. So the more carbohydrates you eat, the more thiamine you're going to need. So if you're eating carbohydrates that have not been fortified with thiamine, like let's say a chocolate bar, sugary beverages, you're just depleting your body's thiamine sources. So instead of teaching our citizens to look for thiamine-rich whole foods, basically we've chosen to fortify our food, engineer our food. And it's not just us, it's all these nations, because thiamine is just that important. All around the world, people are fortifying processed grains with thiamine. So for those of you who think that taking supplements can be bad or are on a low-carb diet, you really should look into food history and learn how these nutrients were discovered to understand that meeting the recommended minimum intake may not fully satisfy your daily physiological requirements. When I visited China for the first time after graduating college, I was so impressed with the number of people that were walking or riding their bicycle. It was astronomical because they have a lot of people. Now, everybody at that time was lean, and I was considered fat. Now, I went back in 2019, right before everything shut down. Well, the bicycles nearly disappeared, replaced by modern technology. Nearly everybody was either in a car or on a moped, and their diabetes rates have skyrocketed. When you don't exercise, you're losing the number one metabolic organ that you can change to protect your metabolism, and that is your muscle. And people who have TOFI tend to have low muscle mass. Asians simply don't value exercise because, number one, we're sitting all the time and we don't like the sun. Everyone needs to exercise every day. And if you want to eat bread, even this kind of bread, you need to exercise. You know how much the average Swiss walks in a day? They walk 9,000 steps every day. Look at your health app. You should be walking at least 9,000 steps if you want to eat any kind of bread. And if you want to learn more about the healthiest bread, watch the next video.